When we think of Russia facing threats to its borders, the conflict in Ukraine naturally comes to mind. But is Ukraine really Moscow's biggest challenge? Surprisingly, many analysts argue that Finland, with its long history and unique strategic geography, may pose an even greater concern for Russian security. And it's not just about their 1,340 kilometers shared border. Finland's direct proximity to St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city and a crucial military and industrial hub, adds to the stakes. The question is, why does Finland, a country with a relatively small population and no recent history of direct conflicts, worry the Kremlin so much? The answer lies in a mix of geographic, historical, and strategic factors that have turned this small Nordic nation into a key player on Europe's geopolitical chessboard. To grasp this dynamic, we must revisit the turbulent history between these two neighbors and examine Finland's growing role in the current global landscape. Few people realize that the relationship between Finland and Russia has been shaped by centuries of tension and conflicting strategic interests. This connection began to solidify in 1808, when the Russian Empire, at war with Sweden, invaded Finnish territory. Russia's victory led to the annexation of the region and the creation of the Grand Duchy of Finland, an autonomous entity under the Tsar's control. This conquest was vital for Russia's strategic objectives, as Finland served as a natural shield for St. Petersburg, the imperial capital at the time. The annexation not only pushed Swedish influence further away but also transformed Finland into a critical piece of Russia's security puzzle. However, Russia's rule over Finland was a double-edged sword. On one hand, the Finns enjoyed a degree of political and cultural autonomy, which helped avoid major revolts against Moscow's control. On the other hand, the rise of Finnish nationalism throughout the 19th century began to fuel aspirations for independence, creating a simmering tension. This desire came to fruition in 1917, when the Russian Revolution plunged the empire into chaos. Taking advantage of the turmoil, Finland declared its independence, ending over a century of Russian dominance. Yet, breaking away from Russia did not bring stability. In 1939, just before World War II erupted, the Soviet Union launched an invasion of Finland, marking the beginning of the Winter War. Despite being outnumbered, the Finns mounted a heroic resistance, inflicting heavy losses on the Soviet forces. Although the war ended with Finland ceding territory, their defiance solidified their reputation as a resilient and strategically significant nation. World War II brought further challenges. After Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union, Finland aligned with Berlin to reclaim its lost territories. However, this cooperation with the Nazis was pragmatic rather than ideological. This approach allowed Finland to negotiate a separate peace with Moscow in 1944, preserving its sovereignty but at the cost of territorial and political concessions. During this period, the concept of Finnish neutrality emerged, a survival strategy that would define the country during the Cold War. Following World War II, Finland faced an existential dilemma: how to maintain its independence while sharing a lengthy border with the Soviet Union, one of the world's emerging superpowers in a bipolar world order. After decades of direct conflict, Finland adopted a new approach: neutrality. This strategy wasn't a luxury or an idealistic choice but a necessity dictated by geopolitical realities. For Finland, neutrality meant survival. Finnish neutrality was far from passive. The country adopted a robust total defense model, which included mandatory conscription and the mobilization of society to prepare for a potential invasion. This sent a clear message to Moscow: Finland might not be an enemy, but it certainly wouldn't be an easy target. This approach stood in contrast to Sweden's less militarized neutrality, which relied on its geographically safer position and lack of a direct border with the Soviet Union. Despite constant pressure from the Kremlin, Finland maintained its sovereignty and avoided Soviet occupation, but at a high cost. Domestically, Finnish politics had to tread carefully to avoid provoking Moscow, a strategy that became known as Finlandization. This term describes how a smaller nation might partially yield to the influence of a larger power to safeguard its autonomy. For decades, Helsinki avoided military alliances, focusing instead on building a resilient economy and society while closely monitoring Soviet reactions. Even so, Finnish neutrality was frequently tested. The Soviet Union regarded Finland as an essential buffer zone against the West, treating any Finnish engagement with the United States or Europe with suspicion. Yet Helsinki skillfully maintained a delicate balance, economically cooperating with Moscow while discreetly forging ties with the West to diversify its options. This period of neutrality was a high-stakes diplomatic tightrope, but it ensured Finland's survival through the Cold War. It became a model of resilience and adaptability for smaller nations navigating a world dominated by superpowers. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 would challenge Finland's neutrality in ways never before imagined. The post-Soviet era, from neutrality to Western integration. The Soviet Union's collapse created a new geopolitical reality for Finland. The immediate threat of a totalitarian and expansionist neighbor vanished, but new opportunities and challenges emerged. Without the constraints of Soviet pressure, Finland began exploring ways to integrate with the West while safeguarding its autonomy and security. This shift marked a pivotal chapter in the country's modern history. One of the most significant changes was Finland's accession to the European Union in 1995. This decision, approved through a popular referendum, symbolized a strategic shift away from its historical dependence on Russia. For the Finnish people, EU membership offered not only economic benefits but also alignment with Western democratic values and free market principles. However, even with this integration, Finland remained cautious about formal military commitments, such as joining NATO, to avoid provoking the Kremlin. Still, Finland's relationship with NATO evolved gradually. During the 1990s and 2000s, Helsinki deepened its cooperation with the alliance by participating in joint exercises and international peacekeeping missions. While officially neutral, Finland used these partnerships to modernize its military and strengthen its defense capabilities. This careful balance between integration and neutrality underscored the pragmatism that had long defined its foreign policy. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 profoundly altered Finland's perception of European security. This act of aggression reignited old fears of Russian expansionism and underscored the volatility of regional geopolitics. In response, Finland began reassessing its stance on neutrality. Increased defense spending and closer cooperation with NATO were among the early indicators of this shift, which gained momentum as public opinion also tilted in favor of Western alliances. During this period, Finland transitioned from a nation actively avoiding confrontation to one recognizing the importance of strategic alliances for its security. This gradual transformation laid the groundwork for drastic decisions made after 2022, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine once again tested European security. For many Finns, the attack echoed the dark memories of the 1939 Winter War, when the Soviet Union invaded Finland in an attempt at subjugation. Suddenly, the lessons of the past seemed more relevant than ever. Finland's geographic proximity to Russia and historical experience with direct conflicts turned the assault on Ukraine into a stark warning about Europe's fragile security landscape. Russia's aggression was seen as a definitive breach of the international norms underpinning continental stability. For Finland, it became clear that relying solely on historical neutrality and self-defense would no longer suffice in an increasingly unpredictable environment. The invasion revealed the risks of isolation when faced with a neighbor willing to use military force to achieve its strategic goals. Finland's response was swift and decisive. Within months, both the government and the public made a historic pivot toward NATO. Opinion polls showed, for the first time, that a majority of Finns openly supported joining the military alliance. This shift reflected not just a change in public sentiment but also a pragmatic acknowledgement that NATO offered the only real security guarantee against a potential Russian attack. The decision to join NATO, formalized in 2023, marked a definitive break with decades of neutrality. For Finland, membership in the alliance was not merely a matter of defense. It was a declaration that the country would not be intimidated by external pressures. While this move carried risks, it was widely regarded as an inevitable response to the new geopolitical reality. Throughout this process, Finland retained its reputation for pragmatism and resilience. Its swift adaptation to shifting international dynamics demonstrated how the country had turned its history of vulnerability into a position of strategic strength. Yet joining NATO also introduced new challenges, including balancing its military posture with regional stability. These changes reverberated across the Nordic region, redefining Finland's role in European security. With its 1,340-kilometer border with Russia, Finland became NATO's new eastern flank, significantly expanding the alliance's presence along Russia's borders. This expansion reshaped the region's political geography, carrying far-reaching implications for both sides. One of the most visible impacts was on control of the Baltic Sea. With Finland's membership and Sweden's impending accession, the Baltic Sea is on the verge of becoming a NATO lake. This situation further restricts the Russian Navy's freedom of movement, compounding its logistical challenges in an area already dominated by allied nations. For Moscow, this development represents a significant strategic setback, as it limits naval operations and exposes critical supply routes. The expanded NATO presence along the Baltic coastlines underscores how Finland's accession has reshaped the regional balance of power, heightening tensions and redefining the strategic calculus for all parties involved. Beyond its proximity to sensitive Russian regions, Finland's geography provides unique strategic advantages due to its Arctic position. With direct access to the polar region, Finland is situated within a geopolitically significant area, especially as Arctic ice melts and new maritime routes open. This factor connects Baltic regional interests with global dynamics involving the United States, China, and Russia in resource exploration and control over emerging trade routes. Another often overlooked element is Finland's extensive infrastructure network in remote areas, including resilient railways, highways, and communication systems. Built to sustain populations in extreme climates, this infrastructure can be adapted for military or logistical purposes in conflict scenarios. Combined with Finland's natural geography, which supports in-depth defense strategies, this level of preparedness complicates Moscow's military calculations and enhances NATO's ability to project security in Northern Europe. A particularly sensitive point is the Kola Peninsula, located in Russia's far northwest, home to key military assets like nuclear submarine bases and air defense systems. Finland's border proximity to Kola increases Russian vulnerabilities, particularly in scenarios involving monitoring or containment. This forces Moscow to redirect military resources to defend an already critical region, adding strain to its logistical and strategic capabilities. Finland's accession also bolsters the Nordic bloc within NATO. Military cooperation among Finland, Sweden, and Norway gains momentum, forming a cohesive defense network across the Arctic and the North Sea. This alliance not only enhances deterrence against external threats but also positions the region as a strategic stronghold for the West, with advanced military and technological infrastructure. Finland's NATO membership has inevitably escalated tensions with Russia. Moscow responded with aggressive rhetoric and threats of military retaliation, including bolstering its presence along the Finnish border. However, Finland's resilience and swift integration of its military into NATO's structure demonstrate Helsinki's readiness to face these challenges. This geopolitical transformation reflects a broader shift in Europe's balance of power. Russia's attempts to weaken Western unity through actions in Ukraine inadvertently provoked a coordinated response that solidified the military alliance of the West. For Finland, joining NATO not only provided a security guarantee, but also reaffirmed its commitment to an international system grounded in cooperation and collective defense. The entry of Finland into NATO, soon to be followed by Sweden, marks a significant regional shift. It redefines the European security architecture, ending an era of Nordic neutrality and ushering in a new phase of strategic military cooperation. However, this transformation brings challenges. Maintaining stability in a region now at the forefront of tensions between Russia and the West will be a complex endeavor. One potential strategy to prevent escalation is adopting the so-called Norwegian model. Like Norway, Finland could limit the presence of permanent NATO bases and nuclear weapons on its territory, balancing its role within the alliance while reducing the perception of direct threat to Russia. This pragmatic approach could allow Finland to contribute to NATO without exacerbating tensions with Moscow, minimizing the risk of severe retaliation. Domestically, Finland faces the challenge of fully integrating its armed forces into NATO's structure and adapting its defense policy to this new reality. Its unique geographic position makes Finland a focal point for monitoring and responding to Russian movements in the region. For Finnish leaders, this requires balancing national defense enhancements with the operational demands of the alliance. Regionally, the Nordic bloc's role in European security will need re-evaluation. With Finland, Sweden, and Norway working more closely together, the region could become a hub of military innovation and efficiency within NATO. This collaboration will strengthen collective crisis response capabilities, not just in Northern Europe but in other strategic areas worldwide. However, this bloc must also meet rising expectations from allies and demonstrate its significance within the broader alliance framework. Perhaps the most profound impact of Finland's NATO membership lies in its message to Russia. The alliance's expansion into traditionally neutral territories underscores the consequences of Moscow's actions, reinforcing that aggression leads to a more united and expanded NATO. While this poses a growing challenge for Russia, for Finland and its allies, it reflects the cost of ensuring collective security in uncertain times. Preventing military escalation will require ongoing efforts, as both Europe and Russia navigate this new reality. Ensuring that cooperation, rather than conflict, defines Europe's future will be critical to maintaining stability. Finland's entry into NATO marks the beginning of a new chapter in European security history. While the challenges are immense, the opportunities to strengthen regional stability and ensure lasting peace are equally significant. The responsibility now lies with European, Finnish, and Nordic leaders to rise to the occasion and shape a secure and cooperative future. Thank you for watching this GlobalFlow documentary. Be sure to check out the next video we've prepared for you here on the screen. Take care, and we'll see you there.